Good morning, everyone. On behalf of Dr. T. Dilip Kumar, President, Indian Nursing Council, I, Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Sarabjit Kaur, Secretary, Indian Nursing Council, extend a very warm welcome to all our esteemed panelists who have joined us today, and also to all the attendees, our nursing officer, nurse clinicians who have joined us in this endeavor. This is a three-set series webinar in which we are going to have the first presentation today. During the last presentations, we have discussed about essential family planning and reproductive health care, and the session today is going to be on basic management of obstetric emergencies during the antenatal period. World Health Organization has envisioned a world where every pregnant woman and newborn receives quality care throughout pregnancy, childbirth, and the postnatal period. What do women want out of pregnancy? Women only want a positive pregnancy experience through proper antenatal care, that is, a healthy pregnancy for the mother and a baby who is safe. This antenatal care given by the nurse midwife will have a very effective transition into positive labor and the baby being born in a proper environment. Hence, the basic purpose of managing obstetric emergencies during the antenatal period is to provide care and evidence-based interventions that can prevent and treat complications of pregnancy. With this in mind, we are going to have three presentations today, tomorrow, and day after. The first presentation for today is on basic management of obstetric emergencies during the antenatal period. I take this opportunity to introduce you to our esteemed panelists today. We have with us Dr. T. Dilip Kumar, President, Indian Nursing Council. May I request the panelists to please raise their hands as they are being introduced. Dr. T. Dilip Kumar.
Ma'am, if you put the screen off, we can see everybody, ma'am. If you stop the share screening, ma'am.
Okay, so there it is.
Thank you, ma'am.
Dr. T. Dilip Kumar, President, Indian Nursing Council. We have Mrs. K.S. Bharti, Joint Secretary, Indian Nursing Council.
Hello, good morning, everybody. I'm glad to see so many participants. I would really appreciate if you are there for full 90 minutes. Then only I will be able to give you the certificates of participation. We have observed that many people just log in and log out. For them, we will not issue the certificates. The candidates who are there for almost 90 minutes, going through all the presentations and sitting for 90 minutes, for them, we are going to give the certificate of participation. So I request all the participants to be there till the end. Thank you. Over to you, ma'am.
So this merely means that though we are not there face to face, we still are going to keep a check like a teacher and ensure that you are there in the class. So we'll request you to please be there, present in the class, so that you get your certificate of participation. We also have with us Dr. Punita, who's a senior consultant with Indian Nursing Council. Dr. Punita. We have Dr. Kirti Iyengar, who's a National Program Officer from UNFPA. Ms. Bright Mary, who's a Senior Program Officer, JPIGO, and a National Consultant of Midwifery with Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. We have Mrs. Abra Pearl, who's again a Technical Officer with Indian Nursing Council. And it is a privilege to introduce the speaker for today, Mrs. Bijoli Sinha. She is the State Program Officer of Maternal and Neonatal Health with JPIGO, and she is a MSc nurse with pediatric specialization. We have to assist us in the software team, Mr. Madhav Reddy, who is a Senior Consultant IT, and Mr. Kundan and Mr. Prashant, who are going to be with there. So without further ado, I request and invite Bijoli Sinha to kindly begin her presentation.
Thank you, ma'am, and good morning, everyone. I'm privileged to be with you all today. And let us start why, as already ma'am has informed, like why it is important. So let us quickly go to our session and let's see why it is important to identify and manage the basic emergency complication during antenatal period. So I'll just take 1 minute. I'm sharing my screen so that everyone can see the content.
We'll request all the attendees to kindly put their question answers in the chat box, or you could raise your hand by going to the participant icon which is there. Please ask questions.
Before proceeding this session, I just wanted to make sure I'll be speaking majorly in English, Hindi, and also I'll mix English. So,
Madam, little louder.
Yes, can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yeah, little louder. Yeah.
Yes. Hope I'm audible now.
Yeah.
Yes. So let us start. हम लोगों को अभी शुरू करना है कि किस लिए बेसिक मैनेजमेंट एज ए नर्सेस के लिए ज़रूरी है. जो ANC पीरियड में जितने कॉम्प्लिकेशंस हैं जो खास करके मैटरनल मॉर्टेलिटी में काउंट करते हैं उनके ऊपर आज बात करेंगे. तो आज की ये जो सेशन है इसमें हम खास करके ये देखेंगे कि अपने इंडिया में अगर मैटरनल डेथ हो रहे हैं तो मेजरली ऐसे कौन कौन से मैटरनल डेथ के कारण हैं और ऐसे हमारी क्या स्किल है एज ए नर्स जिसके थ्रू हम बेसिक इमरजेंसी सर्विसेज दे सकते हैं. और इसमें एंटीनेटल पीरियड में ऐसे कौन कौन से लिस्टेड केयर है जो एविडेंस बेस्ड है, अगर हम करेंगे तो अपने मैटरनल मॉर्टेलिटी को कम कर सकते हैं. इसकी शुरुआत अगर मैं करूं तो मैं ये बोलना चाहती हूँ, जैसे आप लोग ये प्रोवर्ब जो देख पा रहे हैं जो महमूद फतल्ला का था जो प्रेसिडेंट फिगो के थे, उन्होंने बहुत सुंदर सा एक प्रभाव बताया कि अभी भी अगर हमारे माताओं का मृत्यु हो रहा है तो वो कोई डिजीज से नहीं जो ट्रीटेबल नहीं है, बल्कि इसलिए क्योंकि अभी भी हमारे सोसाइटी जो है वो डिसाइड करता है क्या वो औरत की जिंदगी ज़रूरी है, उनको बचना सरवाइव करना चाहिए कि नहीं. तो ये बहुत इम्पॉर्टेंट है क्योंकि आज भी हमारे सोसाइटी में यही है तो मेजरली इम्पैक्ट देता है. अगर हम इसके इम्पैक्ट के ऊपर बात करें तो हमारे इंडिया में जब हमने 1990 का बात करें तो हमारे मैटरनल मॉर्टेलिटी जो था वो बहुत ज़्यादा था, 556. और आज अगर हम 2017 का ये डेटा देखें तो वो कम होकर हमारा हुआ है 122. तो ड्रास्टिकली हम लोगों ने बहुत अच्छा काम किया है. वहीं पर अगर हम ग्लोबल डेटा देखें तो ग्लोबली 385 थे जो वो पहुंचकर वो अभी 211 में हुआ है. तो अगर ओवरऑल हम इंडिया का ये देखें मैटरनल मॉर्टेलिटी का डिक्लाइनेशन 78% में है. लेकिन हमें इतना भी खुश होना नहीं चाहिए बिकॉज वी हैव हमारे पास अभी भी ऐसे स्टेट है जो ऑलरेडी एसडीजी गोल अचीव कर चुके हैं सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट के, इसमें वो लोग ऑलरेडी बिलो 70 के उसमें चले गए. अगर हम एग्जांपल ले तो केरला ऑलरेडी हमारे बहुत आगे ये है, उसके साथ साथ महाराष्ट्र एंड तमिलनाडु. वैसे ही हमारे अगर हम उसी में बात करें हमारे
Bicholi, can I interrupt you?
Yes.
We're getting some requests in the chat box. If you could converse in English, please.
Okay, ma'am. I was communicated to speak in Hindi. That's why. Yeah, sure. Thank you, ma'am.
You can make both the English and the Hindi. You just try to combine both the languages.
Yes, sir. I'll take care of this. So, if we see the major maternal deaths also happening, it includes few districts as well as few states in India. So, let us see why our mothers are dying. Today, we are in such a stage where we have so well equipped, but still our mothers are dying majorly due to the hemorrhage, which is happening either in antepartum period or postpartum period. And secondly, leading cause is hypertensive disorder during pregnancy, and it is followed by sepsis, obstructed labor, abortion, and others. I think most of us, we know in others, usually those conditions we include like malaria in pregnancy or heart diseases in pregnancy, where we have limited, we have specialized intervention. So we usually talk about those preventionary causes, direct causes. If we talk about it, we have hemorrhage, which is majorly contributing. If we see, can't we manage all this complication? Yes, we can. If it's a condition of hemorrhage, is mostly of PPH, and PPH could be managed or prevented by AMTSL, active management of third stage labor. And if we are introducing oxytocin injection or a tablet misoprostol in a correct order, we can manage it. Also, if the mother requires blood transfusion, it also helps in reducing those numbers of maternal mortality. At the same time, if we go about the sepsis, till now in 2020, still we are losing many mothers due to sepsis. And it's like COVID also has given us the some learnings. We have to be very careful with infection prevention practices. So I'll just focus on like why infection prevention practices are important. And if we have identified the condition as an infection, correct antibiotic will help the mother to revive. And also in the antenatal period, if we are giving TD injection at the correct time, and also follow 6 clean during labor. I think most of us, we know about the 6 clean. In delivery, we usually have unlimited cleans, but minimum 6 clean we talk about mothers and as well as newborn. And if we go ahead with the hypertensive disorder, and you will see like it can be identified in early by doing BP measurement at every antenatal checkup. And if the mother has already diagnosed as PIH, then we can start with antihypertensive. If her condition is worsening, we can start with injection magnesium sulfate, which government of India has given an standing order, like nurses can introduce first dose of magnesium sulfate. Again, if we see the 4th cause of maternal death, that is obstructed labor, which we can see during intrapartum period, we can identify it very easily if we do a timely plotting of partograph. And if we use the partograph for decision making, it will help us to identify obstructed labor, and mother could be saved by transferring her immediately if she needed LACS. Also, there are 8% of maternal death, still it is contributed by abortion. In abortion, I personally believe no mother is getting pregnant because she wants to abort. No one. It's only because she doesn't want it, or willingly she is pregnant. That's why she needed such abortion. So if somebody should not face that, what is a need? Is the need of family planning, counseling, and if already she has gone for abortion, post-abortion care should be given to her. As I mentioned, in others, we have malaria and pregnancy and all, which usually we can't do much, but yes, we can obviously help if we identify any cause immediately. Apart from those direct causes, if we see some contributing delays, which usually is a cause of death for mothers, I'll mainly highlight those. It's like delays. 3 delays usually we talk about. Those are ये delays क्या है? तो अगर हम ये डिले का बात करते हैं, तो सबसे पहले बात आता है माँ को रिकॉग्निशन होना. The mother need to recognize whether she has any danger sign. Because if she knows, or if her family member knows, then only they will seek care. So delay in seeking care itself, it is a cause why she is delaying in seeking care. Second delay is related to the transportation. Transportation means nowadays we have many government schemes where we give her 108 services as ambulance can go and can pick up. But due to unawareness, और माताओं को अभी भी पता नहीं है कि कैसे वो ट्रांसपोर्टेशन अवेल करे, जिसके कारण हमारे जो सेकेंड डिले है हेल्थ फैसिलिटी पहुंचने के लिए, और द मदर डिले इन लिंकिंग विद रेफरल फैसिलिटी, it also cause contribute in maternal death. And third delay, it usually related to receiving the mother when the mother comes to facility and initiating appropriate care. If we see about this, because it basically depends on a nurse skill, nurse midwife, how skillful she is, how competent she is, and whether she is fully equipped. If she is fully equipped, obviously, after receiving, she can initiate the treatment, and it may reduce the delay due to receiving or initiating appropriate care. So the three delays, if we identify them correctly and if we address them at the right time, we can manage, we can prevent many maternal deaths. So as it has already been mentioned, like community mobilization, family orientation is most important for every pregnant mother, and also the socio-economical status. Nowadays, we know JSY is there. So if the mother is going for a public facility, she doesn't need any kind of spend any amount in the hospital. But yes, her family member, if they are accompanying her, maybe they need for their basic things. That's why they need to prepare a little amount so that they are well equipped. And if the mother need any higher referral in higher center, it can be accommodate in that amount. And thirdly, if we talk about delay, third delay, as I mentioned very clearly, a skillful nurse, if she identifies it very correctly and provide a quality services, I think the third delay will be, we can reduce the third delay. So with this, I just wanted to focus on why we need SBA or skill birth attendant. I think all the mother, being a mother, or I believe every mother's life, delivery is their normal phenomena, and everyone want a pleasant experience during the delivery services. So it's important that the person who is attending, she should be well skilled, or he or she should be well skilled, so that they can identify the basic complication and what should be done immediately if she is able to identify those complications. So it is known as birth preparedness and complication readiness. Because every one of us, we know, no mother come with a prediction like I'll be developing PPH, I'll be developing PIH. But yes, there are chances, whoever is coming during pregnancy, might be 15% of them, they can develop some kind of complication. So we don't know who are the 15% mother. So we should be doing the same thing for each and every mother, so that we understand who comes under this 15% category. Apart from that, a presence of skill birth attendant make a lot of changes in the delivery services, and our government also recognize, like every delivery, whether it is in an institution or it is happening in a community base, there should be presence of skill birth attendant, so that she can technically handle those complications immediately. And as I mentioned earlier also, skill always doesn't help, but your competency. If I know the skill, I should be able to apply it in the clinical field, so that I can serve the mother who is my beneficiary. So let us go why today's session is basically for BMOC centers, like which we talk about basic maternal care services. So in BMOC care facilities, which are the facilities comes under it? It's all the delivery center who doesn't need a surgical intervention, but with medical management they can manage. It's mostly include 24/7 PHC as well as non-CHCs, and few of our sub-center where already we have skill birth attendant, and health and wellness center where we have the community health officer who are well trained, so they can do this, provide these services. If we talk about BMOC services, there are few minimal services which are included in the BMOC facilities. It includes, all of us, we know it's of a parenteral antibiotic, because the doctors will be available and appropriate antibiotic can be given. And also we can administer uterotonic, which can be given parenterally. and we can administer few anticonvulsant like magnesium sulfate, and the person can handle an birth asphyxia where she have to do a bag and mask ventilation, that means newborn resuscitation. So those skills are already included over there. But apart from that, if the facility has already CMOG trained medical officer, they also listed few of the specialized areas like manual removal of placenta, remove retained products of whether it's an incomplete abortion, or if we need to do an assisted vaginal delivery, which usually we talk about vacuum delivery, vacuum extraction, that could be performed in BMOC center if we have a CMOC trained medical officer who is well trained how to handle those situations. So let us talk. When I spoke about maternal death, हमने जब बात किया था मातृ मृत्यु का, तो ये एक complete spectrum है. Not only one factor, but it starts from her conception and it goes on till her postnatal period. So each and every aspect is very important. Here, as the WHO recommend, a good antenatal care can identify the high-risk mother, and if the mother is already identified, her tracking, her usual care, counseling can help us in reducing maternal mortality. So let us see what we have to means as a healthcare provider, what we have to follow. It's registration of every pregnant mother. Once she has notified like she has missed her period within 12 weeks of her pregnancy, she must register. And apart from that, in COVID time also we have seen like they have WHO has previously recommended like she should at least come for 4 antenatal checkup. But as we know, in India, we have many schemes, many yojanas like Pradhan Mantri Matritva Suraksha Yojana, Abhinandan, and so and so. So if we see about that, there are much more where we are targeting all this pregnant mother. But in a tribal area where mother is unable to reach, or a geographically inaccessible areas, there also every mother should be catered this four visits, so that we can at least identify and we can give some corrective, we can do some corrective actions. And apart from that, as sepsis, you have seen a cause of sepsis also contributed by tetanus. So it is always important to give her 2 doses of TD. Nowadays, we don't talk about TT because government of India is already recommending TD, tetanus and diphtheria injection. So we have to follow on that. And it's not 100 tablets, but a mother, once she completes her first trimester, when she starts her 4th month, she should start her iron and folic acid, and it should be continued till she deliver, and after delivery also till she feeds her baby, it should be continued. So let us see what we talk about comprehensive quality antenatal checkup. So what we have seen, if we give a quality antenatal checkup, what we have to do. So we usually we do history collection, we do physical examination, and if the mother's gestational age is already more than 20 weeks, we can go ahead with the abdominal examination where we can perform the gestational age calculation and all. And apart from that, every mother is called in the hospital for some purposes, so which includes testing. That means investigation. So she should be, her hemoglobin should be checked, her urine sugar should be checked, protein should be checked, so that we can identify few complications in advance, and record blood pressure, because as we have already seen, and mother should always carry her MCPC card, the tracking card where her all visits are being recorded. And it's usually recommend like in the first trimester, she should not have any kind of self-administered drug. If it is already suggested by an obstetrician, obviously because of some complication, she can consume those medication. Apart from that, in every antenatal visit, what we have seen, we are doing history collection, we are investigating, we are also checking her blood pressure and all. We are providing her the SBA means skill birth attendant, and also we counsel her she should come for institutional delivery where she will be catered by an skill birth attendant, and also she will be counseled for few of areas like nutrition, her personal hygiene, her rest, her birth preparedness and complication readiness, and also for family planning, which is very important because as we sensitize them, we have more numbers of post delivery exception of some family planning methods. So if we talk about birth preparedness and complication readiness, exactly what is that? It is nothing but the mother's readiness for accepting the baby and her preparedness physically as well as mentally and socio-culturally. So what we can do is always you talk to her and identify the expected place of delivery. EPD, we call about it as a EPD. And also you identify from if she is registered under your facility, you identify if any emergency happens where you should transfer or shift her, refer her. Along with that, nowadays every one of us we know birth companion. It is the most important and vital part of respectful maternity care. So identifying a birth companion during antenatal checkup, it will always help. And the mother, if the companion is well known about the danger sign, so at the they can bring the first delay can be reduced because companion is always accompanying during antenatal checkup, so she is very eager and know about the danger sign. So it is important. And also few emergency costs if they needed, and if mother needed blood transfusion, so her blood transfusion, it's all of us we know it's a exchange process. Like if I have to identify a donor, and then it will be exchanged. So that way every mother, pregnant mother's family member should identify such kind of donor from their family. And every time she goes to the facility, she should always carry her antenatal card so that adequate informations are there, we can gather from there. And also I just wanted to focus, like mother have to, I mentioned like she has to carry her own clothing. Babies needed to be received in a sterile clean cloth, so she should clean it properly. It should not be a dirty cloth, but she has to well prepared her bag so that she can carry when her labor pain starts. So let us see few of the danger sign which mentioned in the last point, like every mother should counsel on danger sign. So what are the danger sign an antenatal mother can face? We just focus on it, and it relates to few complications. So let us see what all complications are. So if mother can come to you due to fever, she may complain you with persisting vomiting. Maybe she is facing palpitation, or she is breathless, she has unusual edema, she has severe headache or blurring of vision, she is complaining of that. Or maybe she told you like she has burning micturition and the amount of urine has gone by decreased, and she is facing like her fetus is not moving around. And also she may complain of PV bleeding and some watery discharges. So this kind of, if we see such kind of complaints, so how we can identify, and this here we play a critical role, and nurse have to identify if she is complaining, what could be the probable diagnosis. So let us talk first on excessive vomiting. Certain few mothers usually they face excessive vomiting during antenatal period, and mostly if it is persisting after first trimester also, so usually it may related to hyperemesis brevidarum. So what you can do, you have to do investigate for her dehydration, whether she has any tachycardia, and as part that you do the corrective action like IV fluid, starting an IV fluid. If you are in a non-FRU, means BMOC center, you can insert a IV line if she has a dehydration, severe dehydration, then followed by sending her to a higher referral center. Palpitation. Many mothers usually feel palpitation when they are severely anemic. And I think all of you know, and you will be must be recognizing anemia also an indirect cause of maternal death. So what usually if any mother is complaining of palpitation, she is fatigued and having breathlessness while she is walking around. So what we can do is we can check her pallor, and the probable diagnosis could be anemia. But here you need to identify if the mother doesn't have anemia, but still she is facing. So you have to consider she might have some kind of cardiac disease which needed to be further re-evaluate. So you have to further link her with the higher referral center. A symptom which is related to frequent urination. As a nurse, what we can do is many pregnant mother usually due to the physiological process, they may suffer from UTI frequently. So you have to, what is your responsibility is identify and link her with the referral center. If she has pain abdomen, usually pain abdomen, we usually talk about suprapubic or retropubic pains. It could be related to some kind of ectopic pregnancy or maybe due to UTI. That similarly, we have to refer her to the higher center. If primary care is needed like IV fluid setup and all, so after fixing it, we can refer it to higher facility. Again, if we talk about fever, when a mother gets fever, usually if she has some other infection or maybe it's malaria in pregnancy, so we have to evaluate. And as we can't do any further nursing management, so it's always better to refer her to higher center. Decreased fetal movement. Nowadays, we don't frequently talk about fetal movement and all, but we usually talk about fetal heart rate. But yes, this is also very important because a mother can identify fetal movement, not fetal heart rate. So we have to teach her like minimum she should have 12 movement. If it is lesser than 12 movement, or she is not feeling any movement, she should come to the health facility. It could be due to IUD. It could be baby is normal, we'll be checking her FHR. Then the fetus might be going into fetal distress. So considering that she needed to come to facility, so we have to suggest her that. And abnormal vaginal discharge, it related to STI and RTI. Leaking watery fluid in PV, so it's because of preterm rupture of membrane. So in this situation, we have to refer her to medical officer or FRU. So let us see, we have seen so many complications in ANC, but what we have to do, like what are the major complications which contributes in maternal death that we have seen, like bleeding. So many times an abortion, which could be seen in early pregnancy or maybe late pregnancies. So let us see, bleeding in pregnancy is divided in two parts. One, when if it is before 20 weeks, we usually call as abortion. So it could be related to the abortion condition. And after 20 weeks, it's basically related to the placenta. So it's APH. We usually mention the term as antepartum hemorrhage. Okay. So if we talk about before 20 weeks pregnancy, so it's of abortion, hydatidif mole or ectopic pregnancy. If we talk about after 20 weeks, it's placenta previa, abruptio placentae, or due to rupture of uterus if she is in third trimester and started her labor. So let us see quickly because we have only 1 hour and where so many complications we have to talk about. So I'll just briefly talk like in abortion, when we talk about abortion, there are three categories which we usually talk about. One is threatened abortion. So threatened itself is you all must be clarified about the term. That means there is a threat, but the sac is intact. So that is known as threatened abortion. In abortion, as a nurse, I think we can identify and we can link her to the appropriate care center. If we talk about incomplete abortion, what happens in incomplete abortion? Usually the fetal product of concept, POC, it may come out or it is incompletely, the sac may be inside. So it's known as incomplete abortion. Again, I'll talk in at the end like what are the basic symptoms usually which is faced by mothers who are facing abortion. So lastly, we usually see about complete abortion where completely the product of concept has expelled out. So how to identify any kind of abortion is like mother will be complaining you slight bleeding or a bit bleeding. If she has a history of complete abortion or complete abortion, so entire product will be expelled and her symptoms will be slightly milder. If we talk about incomplete abortion, the product of concept is already expelled, bleeding will be there. And in threatened abortion, there will be mild bleeding. But how to identify whether it is threatened abortion? So there you can see, if we see her gestational age, means length of her fundus, it will be like whatever she has given us date, approximately that way we are getting the fundal height. But in cases of incomplete abortion and complete abortion, you will be seeing the uterus will be lesser than the gestational age and also the uterus may be softer in complete abortion. So what care should be given? Because it's basically of abortion, so we have to identify if bleeding is more, give her an establish an IV line and refer her to the higher center, because she might need an venual evacuation or the specialized care. So we have to take care, and if she has only threatened abortion, so we can advise her for rest. Okay, there is a very beautiful flow chart which Government of India has given for sub-center or non-FRU, and also for FRU there is elaborated care. But here in every areas you will be seeing mother will be complaining of pain, bleeding, and either history of expulsion of POC or may not be history of POC. So based on that, we are advising her for rest, and then if the bleeding doesn't stop, then we further refer the mother. So what exactly, because we have seen the maternal death also contributed by abortion. So what exactly we have to do is we have to counsel if the mother has already, her abortion is already over. So what we have to counsel, because after abortion, the mother usually goes back to her home. So she should identify her danger sign. So the identification of danger sign is she might have increased bleeding, bleeding is not stopping, foul smelling discharge, abdominal pain, she is feverish, feeling unwell, she is weakness, dizziness, fainting. All these will be counsel to her, like if she is facing any, immediately she should come to hospital, because it may lead to, it is a indication of sepsis after abortion. Okay, apart from that, what she have to do in the home is self-care. Self-care is nothing but she have to maintain her personal hygiene, she have to take rest, adequate nutritious food. When we talk about the personal hygiene, she should maintain her perineum should be clean, and clean sanitary pad should be used. If it is not available, then clean cotton cloths should be used. And she will advise her not to resume sexual intercourse till her bleeding is stopped. Okay, apart from that, what I believe is, because it is a maximum higher time or risk time, so we have to counsel her on post-abortion family planning methods, so that she can adopt any of the appropriate methods. So if we talk about counseling of family planning method immediately after post-abortion, so we usually need to tell her why she need to adopt a family planning method. Is because she has to identify her fertility can be returned as soon as 11th day of abortion. So if in between that, if she is having some means sexually she is, physically she is with her husband, it may lead to later pregnancy. So to delay the next pregnancy, what we have to do, we have to tell her about return of fertility and some method which she can adopt. And if we see about, and we'll encourage her, at least minimum 6 month duration should be there after abortion. And if she want to conceive, then she want to take the space, so some method will be advised to her. Usually all kind of family planning methods she can adopt, but we need to see if it is related to infection, she has sign of infection, her IUCD insertion should not be done. Or for female sterilization, again she need to take some time, so that we can counsel on that. And if she is not using any kind of method, so her partner or husband will be counseled to use condom consistently to reduce the chances of STI, HIV infection. And also we have to inform her, if her menstruation is not returned within 6 weeks, she have to come to medical officer, so that we can further reevaluate the condition. So it's all about the abortion cases. Next we come to vaginal bleeding in late pregnancy, means after 20 weeks of pregnancy, gestational age. So usually it called as antepartum hemorrhage, and the major causes are due to placental detachment or placental implantation abnormality. So what we call is mainly due to placenta previa or abruptio placentae, or maybe due to rupture uterus. So in any case, APH is a condition where in subcenters or PHC or non-FRU CHC, we can't manage it. What we can do, we have to identify, rapidly evaluate her vitals, and establish an IV fluid, because it's a case of blood loss. So you have to replace her fluid loss through RL or an NS, and refer her to a CMOC center where functional OT is available. Also, you have to encourage her, whoever is identified donor, he or she should accompany the mother. What else we can do in a management of 20 means late pregnancy bleeding? It's what I already mentioned. It's a emergency condition. You alone can't manage it. So what you can do, you rapidly evaluate her vitals, and appropriately, if the cause is well identified, then a cause-based management, and you further refer the mother. But before referral, if we talk about pervaginal examination in APH, we don't recommend to do a pervaginal examination, digital pervaginal examination. But yes, if you want to do an observation, so per speculum examination could be done. And also encourage her to take all kind of USG, whatever is available, because it will help the provider to identify whether it is a abruptio placentae or it is due to placenta previa. After all, if any mother, suppose there is no sign of placenta previa, no sign of abruptio placentae, but you can feel it may be a cause of rupture uterus. So how to identify rupture uterus? I think all of you, being an in-service provider, you must be knowing. The mother will be complaining of PV bleeding, maybe fresh bleeding you will be seeing. And also what you can identify, she will be complaining extremely pain abdomen. And if you go for asking her further whether she had contraction or pain in labor, so she will be complaining of pain in labor, but later on she will tell like the pain has already ceased. She is not feeling any pain anymore, like contracted uterus pain. Then later she will be having an history of previous LSCS, maybe tender abdomen, loss of uterine contour, because when we palpate it in the abdomen, we can see the uterine, we can feel the uterine contour. So it will be absent. While palpating, you can palpate the body, fetal body parts. In superficially, you can feel. And also, if you want to hear the fetal heart sound, you will not be able to hear it. And the main intervention is here. We have to stabilize her vitals And we have to send her to the CMOC center where we can do laparotomy and further evaluation will be there. So immediately refer her by calling the referred facility so that they are ready in from their end, and necessary note will be written to the referral sheet. And also the third cause of pregnancy, means bleeding in pregnancy, is ectopic pregnancy. Everyone knows if the fetal product is developing in fallopian tube, it is known as ectopic pregnancy. The triad symptom, I'll not talk about much, but the triad symptom is, as we have seen in others, pain abdomen, amenorrhea, and vaginal bleeding. It will be complained by mother. And what we can do, we can't do much, but we can reevaluate and you stabilize the mother and refer to higher center. Okay, so that was the first complication which we have spoke about. Let's go to the next complication, that is preeclampsia or eclampsia, the second leading cause of maternal death, which usually we see in antenatal mother. So globally as well as India, it is reported 14% of hypertensive maternal death reported 14%. And how we can do, what we can do, as we have already mentioned earlier, a good antenatal checkup with her frequent blood pressure monitoring, urine albumin, it will help us to early identify preeclampsia. And if she has already identified, we can tell her about danger sign of severe preeclampsia. And if she has already developed it, it better will give her injection magnesium sulfate. I just wanted to talk about few definitions which are very important to identify PIH, few conditions in PIH. So all of us, we know what is hypertension. Hypertension is when the mother or any person's blood pressure continuously, it is 140/90 in two consecutive readings 4 hours apart. So it is known as hypertension. What is pregnancy, hypertensive disorder in pregnancy? So it is usually considered if a mother, we divide it into 20 weeks. So if the mother is having blood pressure before 20 weeks, it is known as chronic hypertension. That means the mother is having hypertension from earlier, but as she is coming for frequent investigations and all, now we are identifying her as a chronic hypertension. What happens if 20 weeks, that means after placental complete development of placenta, the mother may develop her increase of blood pressure due to some unknown pathological condition. So that's why it is pregnancy induced it is called as pregnancy induced hypertension, usually developed after 20 weeks of gestational age. So there we have to identify what is preeclampsia. Already we know like what is the range of hypertension. It's 140/90. Apart from that, if her urine albumin in her urine albumin test, if it is 3 or 2+, we'll be considering her as a preeclampsia case. And further, if we go, if it is not identified properly at that time, her condition may deteriorate and she may land to severe preeclampsia. So what is severe preeclampsia? Apart from preeclampsia, if the mother is complaining of other danger sign usually how I remember is always remember danger sign from top to bottom. So how we identify headache, blurring vision, unusual edema. Unusual edema is like puffiness of face, the whole body swelling, or hands are swelling, vulval swelling. So it is known as an unusual edema. And also the mother will be complaining of breathlessness or difficulty in breathing. She will be having complaint of epigastric pain, or she may complaining of complaining of her urinary output has decreased. So these are the danger sign for severe preeclampsia. So with preeclampsia, if any mother is having danger sign, it will be labeled as severe preeclampsia. Also another condition is when the mother is having extremely high blood pressure. That means 160/110, with proteinuria 3+ or more than that, then we consider that mother, irrespective of danger sign, we consider her as a severe preeclampsia. When we talk about eclampsia, the government of India has mandated any mother after 20 weeks, if she is coming with convulsion, label her as a eclampsia mother, because convulsion, it's a indication for eclampsia. But usually we talk about if mother is having preeclampsia and she is coming with convulsion, she will be diagnosed as a eclampsia. So is there anything through which we can prevent preeclampsia? Yes. In a few of the case studies, it was seen like where calcium has been given adequately. Adequately means 1 gram per day. Then those mothers are having lesser chances of developing preeclampsia. So considering those studies value, so government of India and WHO also recommended recommended calcium supplementation for all mother once she completes her first trimester, means from the starting of fourth month she have to start calcium tablet. The calcium tablet, usually we know it's available in 500 mg and elementary calcium and with 250 IU vitamin D3. She should be given twice along with food. Okay, so let us see what we can do if any mother is having a preeclampsia. So usually preeclampsia can be treated from OPD basis. The mother need not to be hospitalized. So what are the basic care we have to take care is the mother have to is already in the high blood pressure, so she has to come to facility, or in this COVID situation, if she is unable to come, the ANM or ASHA can be visited, because few of the state has given the provision to ASHA and ANM to go to facility home and do an home survey for pregnant mother. So she should be advised for close observation. Her fetal monitoring will be there. Her BP should be monitored, and also whenever she will be visiting to the healthcare facility, her protein should be checked, and advise her for institutional delivery, because anytime she might lend to convulsion if it is not managed properly, and also teach the family member as well as the mother on danger signs, as we had already spoke about head to foot what all can be seen. And if mother is having deteriorated condition, she should be referred to higher center, and before referring, always prefer, if she has already landed to severe preeclampsia or eclampsia, injection magnesium sulfate should be administered. So what happens if any government of India has mandate, if we have identified severe preeclampsia or eclampsia mother, she needed to be hospitalized immediately. Her BP should be monitored and injection magnesium sulfate should be started. So what we can do is, if the mother is having convulsion, what we can do, it's a emergency condition. So I usually talk about, when we talk about clinical management, it's always of ABCD. What is ABCD? ABCD is always, remember about airway, it should be patent. So you need to suction and clarify her airway. Breathing, if she is, her position should be left lateral position, and oxygen should be administered at 6 to 7 liter per minute. And also we have to think about putting an IV line, because maintaining circulation also is equally important. It's low IV line. And C stands for catheterization, C stands for circulation. So in severe preeclampsia and eclampsia, as mother may not be able to tell you her output, so it is our responsibility to introduce an catheter so that we can monitor the output. And lastly, D is for drug. Drug is, here we usually talk about antihypertensive and anticonvulsant. Antihypertensive, usually when we talk about antihypertensive, it's we'll talk in the next slide. So we'll just see, and also always remember she should be free from fall. We have to take care of, she should not have any further physical injury. So always, instead of talking a irrespective thing, so I usually believe always call for help and involve the two companion. If two family members are in two sides, you can always prevent fall of mother and further injuries can be taken care. And before that, before referral, you have to always give an injection magnesium sulfate pre-referral dose. So let's go to next level, like how much magnesium sulfate we should give. So if it is sub-center, health and wellness center, or PHC, or non-FRUs where we are handling the mother. So before referral, what we have to do, we have to do the nursing care, like what I have already mentioned, ABC, and prevent her from injury. And apart from that, you talk when you have seen, you have to start the D. D in the non-FRU, you can start injection magnesium sulfate. Government of India has given an standing order for every nurse. If you have identified it correctly, you give 10 gram of magnesium sulfate. 10 gram, how to give? 5 gram in each buttock. So 10 gram will be administered, then you write the dose and refer her to the higher facility. Apart from that, in D, we have included antihypertensive. In antihypertensive, if the mother is treated from OPD, she will be always given alpha-methyl dopa or labetalol tablet 100 mg. If she is already in hospital and immediately you have to act on her BP, so you have to switch to tablet nifedipine 10 mg orally, or you can start with injection labetalol if we are in a FRU center where specialist is available. And when we talk about magnesium sulfate, I rather prefer to talk in this slide. Injection magnesium sulfate, when we start, the first dose is known as loading dose because Government of India follows Pritchard regimen, and it always gives with loading dose and followed by maintenance dose. What is loading dose? In a non-FRU center or in a BMOC center, it's always pre-referral dose, what I have already spoke about, that is 10 gram. A nurse can give independently the first dose of magnesium sulfate. So how to prepare? You have to take a 10 cc syringe, and 5 gram means we have in our supply, usually we have 50% of magnesium sulfate, and each magnesium sulfate ampoule contains 2 ml. So if it is there, so how to prepare it? Take 5 ampoule means 10 ml, and you have to, and then you administer in the right buttock, and then the next dose, the 5 gram, another 5 gram, you have to administer in the left buttock, and target it so that she can reach her functional FRU within 2 hours, so that the IV loading dose can be given. So what is IV loading dose? We have seen IM, and IV include 4 gram. 4 gram, you have to dilute it in such a way so that it becomes 20%. So how to make 20%? So as we have seen, it's of 50%. So you take 4 ampoules of magnesium sulfate, that means 8 ml, and you have to take 120 cc syringe. Apart from that, you have to take 12 cc NS or distilled water. If you will mix it, it will become 20%, and we talk about 20-20-20. It's 20%, 20 ml over 20 minutes, because IV injection is something which should not be given too fast. It should take, we should take some time, because the mother can collapse if we are giving it too fast. So IV dose always should be given under observation or under supervision of a medical person. So if the mother is having any kind of situation, the BLS could be performed. If we are at a tertiary center or FRU center, like functional CHCs are there, where obstetrician is available, there directly we can go ahead with the 14 gram loading dose. So 14 gram loading dose, as we have already mentioned, 4 gram IV followed by 5 gram in each buttock. If she is in a FRU center, as the volume of magnesium sulfate is too much, so what we can do, we can load 21 ml of 2% lignocaine, and we can administer it in deep IM, means in both buttocks. I just wanted to reinforce magnesium sulfate is a very safe drug. If usually it doesn't have immediate toxicity, but yes, if we are not following the timing protocols, the mother may develop some kind of toxicity. So what are the toxicity? It's urine output. Her urine output may decrease. Her deep tendon reflex, because magnesium sulfate is a muscle relaxant, so it may affect on her musculature. So she will be having deep tendon reflex, absent deep tendon reflex, and respiratory rate may goes down if we have pushed it so early. Okay, so when to check this toxicity sign? I'll just go back to maintenance dose. I think I have, yes. I have spoke about loading dose. This maintenance dose is when in a tertiary center or an FRU, if the mother is there, we have to give her injection magnesium sulfate continuously in every 4 hourly 5 gram if she doesn't have any kind of toxicity sign. And for how long I should give? It should be given till, from her time of delivery till 24 hours, or after delivery if she has a episode of convulsion, from that later convulsion to 24 hours. So that is the regime of pre-chart regimen, how to give the injection magnesium sulfate maintenance dose. Okay, so so apart from that, if any mother, suppose we have many participants from in-service practices, maybe from medical college people. So usually what we have seen is, if any mother's convulsion after giving magnesium sulfate, it hasn't stopped. So what we can do, we can repeat the IV dose half, means what I have given in loading dose 4 gram, I have to select 2 gram 20%. 2 gram 20% is very easy. Take a 10 cc syringe, mix it, draw 4 ml of magnesium sulfate, mix it with 6 ml distilled water or normal saline, then push it slowly, so that then you observe whether she is having convulsions are controlled or not. If convulsions are not controlled, usually we label her as a status epilepticus, and we have the another line of treatment where specialized care is needed. And again, I want to reiterate, it is the additional dose of magnesium sulfate is not given by a nurse, but a specialist decide whether to give or not. But it's always good to know about it. We have already spoke about magnesium management of eclampsia. I already spoke, it's a multi-pronged approach. You have to give her nursing care. Always in nursing care, always remember about ABC, prevent her from injury, and you have to initiate the basic drugs like anticonvulsant and antihypertensive if the obstetrician is already advising her. And always it is remember, you have to remember she has to start with a slow IV line that is recommended in a slow IV set. So how much we have to give? We have to target 60 ml can be given in per hourly. That means per minute I have to give at the rate of 8 to 10 drops. And also the important aspect, usually convulsions can be controlled, or controlled after delivery of baby. So we have to take a decision for termination of pregnancy. If it is a severe preeclampsia, we usually she should be delivered within 24 hours. And if it is a severe preeclampsia, within 24 hours. If she is eclamptic mother, plan her delivery within 12 hours, and the best they usually prefer for normal delivery. But if the mother is already having repeated convulsion, they usually prefer to take her for LSCS. So the next condition, which is not a maternal condition, but it's giving a lot of threat for the newborn, because when we talk about newborn, 34% of newborns are dying due to preterm birth. preterm babies are dying. So how we can do and what is our responsibility is we have to identify what is preterm birth. Preterm birth is any baby who are delivered before 37 weeks of gestational age is known as preterm preterm baby. And delivery, if it is having, the mother is in labor, so it is called as a preterm labor if it is happening before 37 weeks. What could be the cause of this preterm birth or preterm delivery? It is mostly, I believe, as a 4Ps. How 4Ps? It's always antepartum hemorrhage, which is straight for preterm birth. It's always severe preeclampsia or eclampsia, which is also another, which may lead to delivery. And if the mother is spontaneously going for labor, preterm premature rupture of membrane, and usually preterm premature rupture of membrane could be introduced by infection in genital tract, mostly known by genital tract infection, or maybe hyperdistended uterus. Hyperdistended uterus means I mean to say if it is multiple pregnancy or the mother is having polyhydramnios, it may lead to premature rupture of membrane. Let us come to what care should be given. It's always if the baby is in threat. So to manage that baby, mother's health is okay. The predisposing conditions could be treated, but for baby, what we can do is we have to estimate her gestational age if she is in true labor. And if her gestational age is between 24 to 34 weeks, we have to give, because before 35 weeks of gestation, baby's lung is not mature, surfactants are not there. So we have to introduce her antenatal corticosteroid. When we talk about antenatal corticosteroid, Government of India has recommended dexamethasone as drug of choice because it is low cost, everywhere it is available, and it needed to store in a refrigerator. And if we talk about the doses, usually antenatal corticosteroid given as a 6 mg deep intramuscular 12 hourly, and the dose is of 4 doses we have to give 24 hours apart. And always remember, Government of India has given allotted us for 1 course of antenatal corticosteroid complete. If any mother has already resumed and her tocolysis has happened, if she is going back to home and again coming back to us in preterm labor, always remember, need not to give any other antenatal corticosteroid doses, because it may cause some neural defect. Okay, so that's why on the third point has already mentioned over here, maximum effect is if you are giving it 24 hours, the maximum effect. But any mother is coming in imminent labor, she also should be given injection magnesium sulfate, antenatal corticosteroid, if the pregnancy's gestational age is within 24 to 34 weeks. As I have already mentioned, indication of preterm labor is antenatal corticosteroid is always 4P. Remember the 4Ps, preterm labor between 24 to 34 weeks. And if any condition which is a threat for conducting a delivery before 34 weeks, that is antepartum hemorrhage, preeclampsia, or maybe preterm premature rupture of membrane. In contraindication, usually government has given if she has frank chorioamnionitis, means signs of infection, we should not give injection and dexamethasone. So, so that point we need to keep in mind. What are the role when we, as a nurse, what we have to keep in mind is, if she is coming to you in a non-FRU, if you have identified she is in true labor, and maybe she needed to, we need to conduct her delivery in such condition, so give her first dose of antenatal corticosteroid. In her referral card, clearly mention when you have given the antenatal corticosteroid, and you can send her to a higher center where all the facilities are available, especially SNCU services are available. And if you are seeing the birth is already imminent, during that time you have to, because birth is something which you have to attend. If you need to do conducted in your facility, conducted after giving first dose of antenatal corticosteroid, and if needed, do newborn resuscitation and link the baby, mother and baby, to the specialized hospital where SNCU services can be provided, and everything should be mentioned in the referral card. And also during transportation, we have to keep in mind, most of the babies are dying due to hypothermia. So while during transportation, the temperature change should be maintained. I'll just focus on few points. Like usually we prefer to give injectable dexamethasone, not oral preparation. And we should not repeat it once the course is completed. 4 doses are given, should not be repeated. And also if the mother is coming, anyway, the preterm period is before 37 weeks. So if any mother is coming after 34 weeks, within means near term period, you need not to give her antenatal corticosteroid. Why we are choosing dexamethasone? Why not betamethasone? Because dexamethasone is easily available and WHO recommends it. And also for betamethasone, we have to put it, always store it in refrigerator, which I haven't seen in any facility. If any facility is doing it, that's very good. But without a specialist advice, you can't give. So basically, we are allowed to give dexamethasone, and Government of India has given a standing order for 3 medicine. 1 injection magnesium sulfate, 2nd dexamethasone, 3rd injection oxytocin for AMTSL. We have to always remember this before introducing first dose. So the summary is, nurses, I believe 80% of deliveries are attended and are attended by nurses. They are the key person who can identify the primary complication by knowing what could be those symptoms, and can do the basic management and pre-referral care. If we are doing it in a correct way, obviously in antepartum period, these complications we can manage this complication by early identification, and also we can reduce maternal and neonatal mortality. What we have referred, you must be knowing, we have referred as a Skillbirth attendant guideline, guideline for antenatal corticosteroid, guideline for calcium supplementation, and also Dakshata guideline. With that, I just wanted to know, I wanted to thank everyone, because you are the one who all are reaching to each and every mother, and you are the one who is providing compassionate care. And it is my everyone might be very very engaged, and they are willing to reduce the maternal mortality. So let us place together to work to reduce maternal mortality. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am, and thank you, sir. I'm done.
Can stop sharing then, please. Thank you, Bijoli, for that very, very detailed presentations. Lot of thank yous are pouring in, and people are really appreciating the detailed way in which you have discussed the various emergency situations during the antenatal period. We have had around 5,000 plus registrations today, and around 3,000 nursing officers from different parts have enrolled, and they have clicked in. We have a variety of nursing personals from the from the colleges, from MSc students, nurse clinicians from different hospitals, from the rural health centers. So it's very heartening to note that your content has been very widely disseminated.
Madam, just 250 plus are on live YouTube.
Yes, And also for those who have not been able to, click on and register with us because the registrations were limited to 3,000, we are having live streaming on the YouTube link also. So we'll be, disseminating this information far and wide. It was totally clinical based on patient care at the bedside, and most of the topics that you have discussed in the antenatal scenarios, you have like actually taken us there at the bedside of the mother. I could feel we were loading syringes and giving to the mothers who were in distress. So yes, it was a very, very informative sessions. We have many questions coming in. I hope you had some water and all, Bijoli.
Yes,
You're
ma'am.
able to take. Yes, it is. You have been speaking non-stop, and it was very, very descriptive, detailed in nature. There are questions on the various protocols which are being recently followed while looking after these emergency obstetrical conditions in the antenatal scenario. So I'll start with basic questions first. So there is a question that what is a BMOC center, an ideal BMOC center?
Ma'am, already it has been given, like BMOC facilities are the facilities where we usually provide basic emergency obstetric care. B for basic, M for emergency, O for obstetric, and C for care. So basic emergency obstetric care is for non-FRU facilities which are conducting deliveries, like PHC, sub-center, some health and wellness center, as well as non-FRU CHCs. CHCs are included in BMOC centers.
Okay. Thank you. We'll take a question with Abra. I could see, Pearl, that you've already answered this question, but for everybody's benefit, if you can please explain the 6 cleans again, which were discussed in the presentation.
Ma'am, shall I?
She already, yeah, you can definitely. Actually, she already answered partially to the candidates who were, putting it on. So that's the reason I went to her. Please, any one of you.
Yes, in 6 clean, we talk about 3 for mother and 3 for baby. For what are the 3 things for mother is the provider's hand should be clean hand, and the surface where I am conducting examination or delivery, so clean surface. And third clean is clean perineum. Every time I go for perineal examination, or if I'm doing conducting delivery, her perineum should be clean with betadine. And 3 clean for baby is clean cord, which is related to, so nothing should be applied in the cord. The cut which we are using to cut the cord, clean cut, so it should be always sterile. And third clean for baby is clean tie, through which we are tying the baby's cord. So clean cord, clean cut, and clean tie. So these are the 6 clean, 3 for mother and 3 for baby.
Thank you. Paul would like to add something? Can't hear you. We can't hear you. I think there's something wrong with the mic. We'll come back to you. You can just check it. Meanwhile, we'll take up questions regarding the current protocols which are going on. So can you tell us what is the current antenatal visit schedule? You've already discussed it, but those questions have been coming in.
Yes. During COVID situation, we have encouraged, like mother should have minimal visit. Minimal visit means 4 minimum visits should be done. But when we are not during COVID, not on COVID, when we talk about the regular usual schedule, so it is 8 to 12 visits. If we see about the Pradhan Mantri Surakshit Matritva Yojana visits, it includes every month on 9th they have this schedule visit to identify and screen high-risk mother. So considering that, usually we divide it in 8 visits for public health facilities so that we can give quality antenatal care. And during COVID situation or any areas where it is not geographically we are not able to access, so on those areas minimum 4 visits should be done.
The next in the same series is what is the frequency of getting the ultrasound done? The scannings, how many scannings are required?
Okay. In this question, I just wanted to mention, usually Government of India has given like 2 ultrasonographies are enough for a mother. So basically the first one we can conduct on the 12 weeks because it's known as anti-scan, where we can see the gestational age and all properly. And the second one is for the anomaly scan, which is recommended from 18 to 20 weeks of gestational age, so that we can identify the anomalies if anything has developed, and the corrective actions can be taken. And further, I think Kirti ma'am, if you would like to focus on it, please.
So, thank you, Bijoli. Very nice presentation. So, just wanted to add 2 things. One is about the number of mandatory antenatal visits, which, as Bijoli said, even during the COVID timings, it is suggested that there should be minimum of 4 antenatal visits. However, some of the additional consultations can take place over telephone. There are detailed teleconsultation guidelines which have been issued. Even Government of India has issued telemedicine guidelines. UNFPA has issued at the global level some guidelines for ANC, which include a lot of coverage by telephone. So several issues like what does a mother feel? Is she eating well? Does she have any urinary symptoms? Does she take her iron tablets? And there are many other questions which can be simply asked over the telephone and advice can be provided. And only if we think that these things are not possible, then we can call her. So in addition to the 4 visits, there can be a few more teleconsultations. That is part 1. Part 2 is about the ultrasound visits. So WHO recommends now that there should be minimum of 1 ultrasound done during pregnancy. Although as per the Government of India's guidelines, it is not mandatory unless a woman has any high-risk pregnancy or a complication. So because we know that our rural situation in the PHCs and those areas, sub-centers where the ANM provide a VHND visit, there it may not be possible. And therefore, if there is a high-risk pregnancy or any complication, then certainly, but otherwise it's not mandatory. If it can be done, very good. If it can't be done, even then it can be managed.
Thank you.
You are muted. Sarabjit, you are muted.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Kirti. We have questions also coming in for the current immunization schedule. By current, I don't mean COVID situation, but what is the latest immunization schedule for antenatal mothers?
It is usually we talk about TT, whatever on her first contact, if we can give, and followed by that the second dose will be given. And nowadays we don't talk about TT because of we have included TD, tetanus and diphtheria. So it's usual, whatever we are following, the similar one currently also will be following.
Dr. Kirti, would you like to add something?
No, I think what she has explained is sufficient. So for the mother, we basically have the mandatory immunization is tetanus only.
So the next question is about if there is a COVID situation, then are there any restrictions placed as far as antenatal care, that is the medications or anything else as per the current protocols?
In COVID situation, there is no such restriction, but only we have to remember the precautionary thing. As ma'am has correctly mentioned, the mother, if not needed, she can go for teleconsultation if she is facing any minor problem. But otherwise, she can continue with the 4 visits. Apart from that, there is no another kind of restriction on regular supplement like for iron, folic acid as well as calcium. And it is nothing has been given, only they have given additional recommendation like what are the precautions the mother can take, like she has to sanitize her hand, like SMS which we talk about, sanitize the hand frequently, use mask, and she should avoid gathering and maintaining social distancing, and also whatever surfaces she is frequently touching, it should be frequently clean with disinfectant. That's all. In medication, they haven't restricted. In supplementation, they haven't restricted any, ma'am.
When we're talking of supplementations in your presentation, you mentioned about folic acid being continued. So we are having questions coming in asking when to start and when to stop the folic acid in the antenatal period.
Ma'am, in pregnancy, if any mother has already identified, so the folic acid could be started as a preconceptional till her first trimester, and once her first trimester is completed, in current preparation of iron, we have folic acid along with that. So it will be given to her entire pregnancy, and once she is delivered, till she breastfed her baby, government has given an a guideline. She can continue her calcium supplement as well as iron if needed for 6 months.
Thank you. Another question, what is the recent maternal mortality rate in India, and also which state has the highest mortality rates, maternal mortality rates, and why?
Ma'am, I'm not the specialized one, but I can talk about data. Currently, India is progress, and as we have seen in the first slide, India has achieved, and they are in 120, means currently in 122 maternal deaths are reported in 1 lakh population. But at the same time, in state like Assam, UP, Bihar, they have higher number of maternal deaths. And if we talk about the causes, there are different kind of means many listed causes are available. But currently, if I start talking about the causes, so some delays are there which related to the orientation, and few things are there which related to our third delay. So it's multifactorial things are there which we.
I think the participant is asking only which state is having high, which state is having low.
Achha, having low is Kerala.
I think Kirti can answer that.
Yeah, so just to add to what Bijoli has already explained, wanted to add about the MMR. So as Dr. Dilip Kumar already said that it is higher in the states of UP and Assam, and it is lowest in the states of Kerala and also Tamil Nadu. And other states have in between. But when we say 122, we have to remember that the MMR of 122 per 100,000 live births mean that in rural areas, it is going to be higher, while in urban areas and in the women who are well-to-do, it is going to be lower. But women who are poorer, who are living very far off areas, it is much higher. And similarly, it depends on many other things like their ability to access the healthcare. So it is very possible that some of the remote rural areas, it could very well be 300-400 MMR, and it is very possible in well-to-do urban areas and among the women who have very good access to the care, it could be as little as 30 or 20 also. So that is one thing that we have to keep in mind. And among the causes of maternal deaths, most of the 35% of all the maternal deaths are caused by postpartum hemorrhage. And that is a session which will be covered tomorrow. That postpartum hemorrhage prevention and management is one of the most crucial things that we should be doing if we want to prevent maternal deaths. And the other causes are eclampsia, unsafe abortion, as well as sepsis and anemia. These are the other 4 important causes of maternal death. So we should ideally be well equipped, even as nurses, to be able to handle all the causes, especially during the COVID scenario. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kirti. You rightly said, though the maternal mortality rates in our country have improved, but still we have the rural areas, and especially issues like home deliveries, poor transportation systems, and also the postpartum hemorrhages, which contribute to a large section of this. We take another question. This is about the 3 symptoms, the 3 earlier symptoms for which indicate complications in the antenatal period. How would you list it as the first 3 complications?
For all.
Can you hear us, Bijoli?
Yes, ma'am, I can hear you. There was issue, so I stopped it. Yes, if we primarily talk about antepartum, few danger signs which usually we see, it's majorly of PB bleeding, and mother can come with a few danger signs like headache, blurring vision, which related to severe preeclampsia, or the mother may come with lower abdominal pain. So, and also these are the three primarily they usually come with complaints, like she must be having PV bleeding or leaking. She is complaining of lower abdominal pain, which is maybe retro or suprapubic pain, and also she might complain of danger sign like headache and blurring vision. So, yeah.
Thank you. This question say the participant is asking, can injection dexamethasone be given 12 milligram 12 hours apart? Is two separate doses?
No. When we are talking about dexamethasone, it's a steroid. Steroid has its limited effect. If we are giving it, it's a slow, it's a slow-acting antenatal corticosteroid. So whenever we are choosing to give her antenatal corticosteroid, dexamethasone as antenatal corticosteroid, the safer dose is 6 mg, because if we are giving higher dose, mother may tends to have higher blood sugar. So considering that, we have to consider, like, for safety dose is 6 mg, 12 hourly, 24 hours apart.
Also, what is the best time to take calcium, tablet calcium?
Best time of taking calcium is with food. Whenever they are consuming food, during meal they can have that calcium. So the maximum absorption will be there.
And would you like to add for iron also?
Iron, usually we prefer either before 2 hours of food or after 2 hours of food, because in the full stomach, usually it interrupts with the absorption. So
there's this question which is asking about manual removal of placenta is not being advised now. Would you like to comment on this?
it is not advised at a non-FRU facility. It is advised under anesthesia. It is nowhere it has been written like manual removal is not allowed. When there is a retained placenta, we need to remove it manually. So the mother needed to be under anesthesia, because it's very painful procedure. So wherever OT is available and the CMOC medical officer or specialist gynecologist is available, that facility should provide manual removal of placenta. Nowhere it only it is restricted for lower non-FRU facilities.
Thank you. It's 12:30, sir. Can we take some more questions? Questions are still there.
Sarabjit, I just wanted to come in for one question.
Please, please.
Yeah. So one of the questions I read was about whether nurses can give magnesium sulfate. So I would like to, in fact, say that the government of India in 2005 has allowed the stillbirth attendants to give the first dose of Metsulf in a case of eclampsia. And the reason is that, as we probably know, that the deaths, maternal deaths after eclampsia used to be very, very high till 20, 30 years ago. And it was found through research in various countries that magnesium sulfate is very effective. Now, suppose a nurse is at a subcenter or a PHC and she gets a woman with eclampsia, but she's scared of Driven Metsulf and she refers her without Driven Metsulf. The woman will take 1 to 2 hours to reach the hospital, and then the admission procedures might take another 30-40 minutes. Then the chances of her death, because of this whole delay of 1.5 to 2 hours, the chances of death increase a lot. And therefore, it is recommended that before a nurse refers, even an ANM from a subcenter or PHC, before she refers, she has to give the first dose of Metsulf. She need not give the subsequent doses, because the subsequent doses can be given at the FRU or at the whichever hospital she has referred to. But this fear among the nurses, in fact, has been one of the factors which should go away completely. And one of the purposes of such sessions is by INC that the nurses should start doing what they are expected to do at the subcenter and PHC level and CHC level. As you know, everybody is busy with COVID, and the responsibility of providing the routine care falls more on the shoulders of nurses, and they have to, do what is recommended by nurses. Thank you.
We have many questions coming on Maxelf.
Sarjit, you can sum up comments of all the people.
Right, sir. We have many questions coming up on magnesium sulfate, but I want to tell you that the those questions have already been covered in the presentation, and the presentation is going to be available on the YouTube. So please go through it again so that you have more clarifications on this. May I now request Pearl, would you like to say something on this?
Am I audible now?
Yes.
Hello?
Can
Yes,
we hear
yes.
you?
Ma'am, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I would like to thank Bijali for her very detailed presentation on antenatal care and managing the complications. And I just wanted to add just a few points on the supplements. There was a question on supplements during antenatal. So to just summarize that, we give iron and folic acid tablets from the 4th month up to the time the mother breastfeeds. And each tablet it actually contains 60 milligram of iron and 500 microgram of folic acid. So that's where folic acid comes in after the 2nd trimester. And calcium, the dose is 1 gram per day. That is taken as 2 tablets of 500 milligram calcium each. Along with that, there is a supplement of 250 international units of vitamin D3 also in the calcium preparation. So calcium along with vitamin D is the second one, and the third one is the dose, that is instead of TT, now we have shifted giving TB, tetanus and diphtheria. The first dose at the time of registration, followed by the second dose after 4 weeks or 1 month. So I just wanted to add that detail. Thank you, ma'am. And thank you for the presentation, Vijay. Thank you.
Thank you, Pearl. Your voice is breaking for me, but thank you. Thank you for your inputs. Dr. Punita, may we request you to kindly comment?
I just want to congratulate Vijali for this very detailed, very comprehensive presentation, and the way in which you answered all the questions. It was well done. I just want to add just one point, because nowadays when you are reading, you find that a lot of published papers are available, and it is always reported that the indirect effects of COVID is much more than the direct effect of COVID. And particularly the indirect effects are mainly on maternal and child health. And the Lancet series very recently reported that the effect of maternal health and the child health is very highly significant. They even said that nearly 60% additional maternal deaths have been reported, and nearly 40% of additional child deaths, that is under 5 together. They have said that much additional deaths have been seen among children. And this is also particularly because of a lot of shortage in the coverage that has to reach the women as well as the children. So I think we need to be very sensitive and cautious about it. We know what to be done and what not to be done, but at the same time, whether it is really reaching, whether our pregnant women are getting adequate care and support and immediate interventions that are required, and what is it really serving as obstacles at this particular point. I think this is a point to be remembered very, very cautiously and seriously. I think with this I stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your inputs. Bharti, are you there? Bharti, we are having some questions coming in for certificates. Would you like to comment? Okay. I think she's not there. I would just like to tell all the participants that we have your email addresses and your certificates will be coming to your email. So please have patience. We also need to verify certain things before initiating for the last webinar also. So it is under process. It will be done. We don't have with us, I think some people have logged out because of some technical issues. May I request Dr. T. Dilip, our president, to kindly...
Is Bright is there?
No, sir, I can't see her. I was trying to see her. I think she's had some technical issues.
Katie, would like to make any final comment?
I already said it. Just wanted to again re-emphasize that we are having this series of webinars this week for 3 days and again in the next week for 3 days, and in which very important topics related to maternal health will be covered in this week, and related to the contraception and young people's SRH and gender-based violence in the next week. And the whole purpose is that because of COVID, the doctors are very busy and the whole health system is very busy with responding to COVID, and the role of the nurses, especially those who are posted in any facility like CHC, PHC, subcenter, it increases. And even in district hospital, it is possible that the doctor is tied up with attending to the COVID patients, and the nurses will have to manage the cases who come for delivery. As Dr. Punita just said, that we don't want the maternal deaths to go up because we have COVID to be managed. And therefore, I would request all of you to take this session and this whole series very seriously and allow the nurses to do as much as possible as it is allowed under ministry's guidelines. We are not saying you do anything which is above what is permitted, but what is permitted is actually quite a lot. It can save lots of lives. Thank you.
So your remark, we have Bharti also with us. She's joined us. There were questions, Bharti, regarding certificates. I've just told on your behalf that we are going to verify the data.
Yes. No, we are going to verify, ma'am, because we have seen many have not attended. They have registered but not attended. So who has attended will be issued a certificate.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. First of all, I would like to congratulate Suna to take a very important session. As Dr. Kirti said, is very, very important during COVID period, where our nurses working in the OPDs, in OBG, and also in the postpartum units and all. No, they are very significant. At the same time, we cannot miss out our faculty also, because faculty is expected to have an interaction with the clinical sites. I think one of the problems we have in nursing education is that there is a big gap between the education and service, because many of our faculty is not in tune with the latest protocol. So I think, I don't know how many people in the, whatever the was the charts, flow charts was mentioning about the sub-centers and all, whether these things are available in the our nursing education institutions. Are you depicting in your in the OBG fundamentals, OBG and the laboratories? So that is a very important concern. That's why in Indian Nursing Council repeatedly we want to reiterate that our faculty has to be in tune with the latest protocols of the Government of India. Because it's keep on changing, and many a times our tendency for faculty is everything has to come to my table, then only I will go into teach. Otherwise, I will take a PARC book or some other book, I will teach. So that attitude should not be there for the faculty. So they should be in tune with the latest protocol. That's why we have started the the methodology that how to bridge the gap between the education service, that is the faculty, and the clinical setting. We have started a pilot program in St. John College of Nursing in Bangalore with a repeated intervention by the Indian Nursing Council. We were able to start the CMC model of the education service, means a teacher who is teaching is also working in the clinicals. So that way, that bridging of the gap has been at least as a pilot basis we did, we were successful. And the same thing now, that concept note we have reflected in our INC website. I want as many as institutions already picking up our concept note and started in some of the institutions. We want gradually, we want to see that all the medical college institutions and teaching institutions, especially ANMs, schools and the JNM and BSc colleges, they should be in tune with the clinical setting. Therefore, that bridging the gap, we are already had a dialogue in the Ministry of Health. Ministry of Health is also, NRHM is willing to forward this type of a guideline to the state governments. So we are working in the Ministry of Health to see that this protocol is also how I know there is a lot of relationship has to be built in the institutions between the clinical setting with the nursing superintendent, with the ward sisters, and also with the principal college of nursing. A big some sort of a coordination and cooperation is required to work this effectively. The ultimate objective is that our students and our clinical setting, because they should get the latest the protocols. And unfortunately, in our system in Government of India, whatever the protocols, it goes to the state government, and the state government will in turn will send it to the district, and district in turn send it to the PHCs, and nowhere the nursing educational institutions are in the line of communication. So with the result, it is our faculty is not able to get this the information about the latest product. That's how INC repeatedly in our all syllabuses we are reflecting that the teacher has to consult the latest protocol. That is I think we are making it very mandatory that instead of textbooks, they should consult the latest Government of India protocols. So that means a principal of the College of Nursing or the institution, they should be in touch with the district health officer, because they will be getting these latest protocols. And even I have repeatedly were telling, why can't we get the district health and family welfare officer at least once in a month to the institution, ask him to share the latest policy protocols. So that will help us, the institution, to get the latest things. So therefore, we are in the process of bridging this gap between the education. And also another important thing is, these are all very, where the competencies, where our nurses and they have to develop the competencies, various skills. So that's why we are already in the process of having the National Referral Simulation Center, which we have established in Delhi. And we have trained about 100 master trainers. One of the methodology we are using in that process is, we know we can't have all the institutions, the state-of-the-art simulation centers, but our during the master training program, our faculty is training the teachers how you can train this in the skill labs, because now the skill lab is an essential. So our people are training how a faculty can train those competencies, make them competent through the skill lab process. So that is I think Sarjit was telling about bringing into the ward, loading and tray and all. All these things has to be done through simulation. So that if we are able to do it, these competencies through the simulation, so they will be able to remember it, and also they will never forget it, and they will be able to have a competent in various procedures. So in that direction, INC is working on that, and UNFPA we are working collaboratively with Kirti. That's one of the reason how to improve the capacity building of the midwifery, even in the clinical settings and also in the nursing education institution. In that direction, we are having the series of webinars, and also we are, after lockdown is removed, and definitely UNFPA and INC is going to come back to the take some further initiatives of the strengthening the midwifery program, and also the latest Government of India's the nurse practitioner midwifery program is also we are going to work very closely after the lockdown is lifted. So best of luck, and I request all the faculty and also the people who have attended, please inform the other people, and as many as I was very happy to see at least 3 or 4 ward sisters who are participating in this webinar. I could see from West Bengal, I think one of the ward sister, one of the staff nurse also I saw. She's been many of the, but please communicate this to as many as clinical nurses to participate it. And I know because the time is very difficult for the sometimes clinical nurses to participate in this webinar, because it is going to be there in the webinar. The faculty should take some initiative of sharing this YouTube with the nurses working in the clinical setting in your attached institution. In that way, we want to see that as many as our nursing professionals get this latest concepts and protocols, And ultimately, because the International Year of the Nurse and Midwife, one of the mandate is given by the global level, the WHO, ICN and UNFPA is working at the global level for the International Year of the Nurse and Midwife, where the WHO and all the global organizations have realized without nurses, you will not be able to achieve the universal health coverage. So in that process, we are very essential, and at the same time, capacity building of our nursing profession is also equally important to achieve the universal health coverage. So therefore, please take this webinar seriously and share with them and inform the many people to participate with. Wish you best of luck. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. You have very rightly said that skill-based competencies are the need for the hour, and we hope that these presentations and webinars that we are doing will actually help all the nursing officers to attain the knowledge and the skill required. So hope to see you all tomorrow at the same time with another session where we are going to talk about intrapartum and postpartum care. I thank all the panelists and all the nursing officers for joining us. Thank you.
Kirti, is there anything you want to say?
Bharti, I think you have to go again, come back.
Mr. Reddy, for the feedback session, we log out and come back again?
Yeah, yeah.